This podcast may contain explicit language. That's the way it crumbles, cookie-wise. The Apartment is next. Welcome to the Greatest Movie of All Time podcast, the show that uses a unique grading style to redefine what the greatest movies are. I'm Tom Duncan.
And I'm Dana Duncan.
We also welcome in our returning celebrity guest, our most frequent guest, making her 16th appearance on the show to date. I believe you've been on also one of two guests who have been on every single season of the show. You hold the current record at 16 for most appearances. It's Christy Duncan. As Dad scrubs whatever ink spot he got on his elbow.
I don't know. Just
An inauspicious start for potting yet again with both of my parents. So I don't believe we've had you on for a Billy Wilder yet. I think the oldest ones that we've had, and you have come on to talk about at least one other Jack Lemmon movie, that being The Odd Couple, I believe last season or the year before. But the oldest film to date that I remember you being on so far with us is the Roman Holiday revisit that you were on the last time. That would be from 1953.
And now I actually went to Rome and saw the fountain, so that was pretty cool.
So what have you been doing with yourself in the interim?
Lots of work, and I just got back from a 2-week trip, well, almost 2 weeks, and pretty relaxed and ready to go back to work and do fun things too.
Fair enough. Now, why The Apartment? You have been requesting this, unknown to the general audience. You have been requesting this for nearly 2 years, but why this movie?
This movie talks or speaks so much to so many people. I really find that when we start talking about classicness or what this movie is about, I think that we're going to find that this movie fits into today's society just as well as it fit back into the 1960 era, and that so many of the characters and the little side plots and just how people treat one another, I think that all is reflected here, and I don't think that there's anything lost in the 60 years or however long it's been since the movie was put out. And I just find Jack Lemmon's character charming. I find that he is just ready and able to take on things that normal people wouldn't. You know, nobody would have cared, but he did. So
you heard it here first, Dad. She's into neurotic, ambitious men.
Well, I'm at least one of those two.
We've seen your neurotic side on this show.
Yeah. Okay.
I just think it's a very classic film, and it still reaches people today.
Yes, because everybody has experience universally with affairs or loaning their apartment out for trysts of others.
Yeah.
So let's give a quick background and cast description for The Apartment here, as we are discussing tonight. For our 267th episode, we reserve space at Baxter's for our late night activities with The Apartment from 1960, celebrating its 65th anniversary, written and directed by Billy Wilder, with I.A.L. Diamond. Cinematography by Joseph Lachelle. Music by Adolf Deutsch, which I know this movie came out like only 15 years after the war, but that has to be one of the worst credit names after the war in this post-war period. Just, I don't know why you don't change it, but all right, fair enough. Starring Jack Lemmon as Calvin Clifford C.C. Bud Baxter, Shirley MacLaine as Fran Kubelik, Fred MacMurray as Jeff D. Sheldrake, Ray Walston as Joe Dobish, Jack Crucian as Dr. David Dreyfus, Frances Weintraub Lax as landlady Mrs. Lieberman, David Lewis as Al Kirkaby, and Edie Adams as Miss Olson. So, how much would you be willing to sacrifice for professional success?
I mean, I think hard work and effort is what you sacrifice personal comfort and time and such for professional success. If you're taking shortcuts, I think it all blows up in your face ultimately. The more shortcuts you take, the less likely it is to be sustainable.
And I think you can probably see that here.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that's shown here. It reminds me too of like the casting couches, since we're talking about Hollywood, taking shortcuts to make something of yourself, sacrificing your moral values for your career. And I think that there's just something inherently wrong in doing that, and you're ultimately going to fail.
I think I would place a kind of dotted line between two things that I think that question entertains. One, you do have to make sacrifices for professional success. It's just period. If you want to build up anything successfully, whether it's 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, it's usually not something that's very quick. It's not going to come easily, unlike this scenario. So I want to kind of separate out what Baxter's doing in this movie from the people who actually do strive for professional success and do it at somewhat of a personal cost, or sometimes their familial relationships or their other relationships. They are willing to go to that extent. And then there are people that are able to somehow balance most of those things with some level of professional success, but you do have to sacrifice. It's just not in the way that Baxter's trying to do it, where he's trying to get up the rung of the ladder through a backdoor route, one. And in the process, he's sacrificing his own moral compass to do it. And I think that's really, to me, where the movie differentiates between those who just simply sacrifice, want to make a name for themselves at work, but do it over a longer period of time, and those that are trying to do it through kind of questionable, if anything, means.
But there, I think I need to argue with you. I don't think he's doing it. He didn't ask for it.
But he's also not saying no.
He's not saying no because it's being offered to him. How many of us, if it's being offered, are not going to take somebody up on it? But likewise, he wasn't searching out for something. And I read an article today by Roger Ebert from 1960 when this came out, and he was talking about how the movie opens up with the scene of all these people busying around in New York, at all these faceless people. He worked in a building with 30,000 people. Nobody pays attention, and somebody was paying attention to him. He was on the low floor, whatever. I can't remember what they said, and then all of a sudden he was on the 27th floor. So he's working his way up the floors. But that was being offered to him. It never tells us really how that all got started. It was already going on at the beginning of the movie. Who he offered it to begin with, or how he got himself ensconced in this sad situation to begin with. It probably was a favor to somebody on a one-time thing, and then other people heard about it, and then other people heard about it, and pretty soon it was just a thing. And if he said no, then people threatened to take away what they said they were going to give him, but were they really going to beforehand? Probably not, until he said no, and then, oh, don't take this away because I won't do it, So I'm not sure how it all got started. He kind of got entrapped, I think,
He
into.
describes it. He goes into detail about it. He talks about the fact that somebody needed to change into a tuxedo for a party, and he let him use his apartment to change into a tuxedo, and then pretty soon it started being somebody else heard that he was using his apartment for something, and then it slowly evolved into rendezvous with the various managers and their paramours.
I don't remember hearing that ever in watching this movie.
Okay, well then you need to rewatch it because it's there.
Okay, can you narrow it down? Because it's not in the opening.
No, it's not. But it's in the middle of the film where he starts talking about how it all started. I think he was explaining it to Shirley MacLaine at some point in the film, how it all started and how this whole thing began getting out of hand. But it's discussed.
Interesting, because for all the times I've seen the movie, I don't recall that.
Well, doing a quick search of this isn't making much of a difference, so I'm not finding it. So it must be either buried or a bunch of other people didn't notice either. But okay, I guess Google searches in the middle of the show always make for great podcasting.
We can look it up afterwards.
So, some additional background on the movie. The Apartment was released on June 15th and June 21st in 1960. On a rough budget of $3 million, The Apartment is said to have grossed roughly $24.6 million worldwide to finish number 8 domestically and number 5 worldwide for the year 1960. Now, as I often do, Dad, did you happen to look up what the worldwide box office for 1960 might have been?
Yes, I did.
Okay. So maybe we should subject Mom to this, but it might be kind of different. I know we're covering this again next week when we get to Elmer Gantry, but can you name any of the others in the top 5 that year?
I read about it today earlier, but I can't remember, no.
Okay. Well,
It
for
just said
those
that this movie had tough competition with what was out there for the year.
For those that didn't look it up, the Swiss Family Robinson was the number 1 movie supposedly of the year. Then Psycho, Spartacus, Exodus, and then roughly The Apartment. Although a couple other ones that you might recognize in the top tier, let's say, The Alamo is also in there, and what we will be covering next week in Elmer Gantry.
And another film that you're familiar with, Please Don't Eat the Daisies, which was a Doris Day, James Garner film, if I remember correct.
They're one of my favorite actresses.
Critics were mostly positive at the time of The Apartment, and it would be nominated for 10 Oscars, including Best Actor for Jack Lemmon, Actress for Shirley MacLaine, Supporting Actor for Jack Crucian, Black and White Cinematography, and Sound. The Apartment would win the Oscars for Best Picture, Director for Billy Wilder, Original Screenplay for Wilder, Art Direction, and Film Editing. Also, this was the last Black and White Best Picture winner until... Does anyone have that?
You, Chris?
No.
Schindler's.
Oh, sure.
There has been one other Black and White Best Picture winner since.
Chris?
It's not my forte. What is it?
The Artist.
Oh, I guess I did see that film.
In 2002, a poll of film directors conducted by Sight and Sound magazine listed the film as the 14th greatest film of all time, tied with La Dolce Vita, also from the same year, and something we covered earlier this season. In the 2012 poll by Sight and Sound, directors voted the film 44th greatest of all time. The film was included in New York Times Guide to the Best 1,000 Movies Ever Made in 2002 as well. In 2006, Premiere voted the film as one of the 50 greatest comedies of all time. The Writers Guild of America ranked the film's screenplay, written by Wilder and I.A.L. Diamond, as the 15th greatest ever. In 2015, The Apartment ranked 24th on BBC's 100 Greatest American Films, voted on by critics from around the world. The film was selected as the 27th best comedy of all time in a poll of 253 film critics from 52 countries conducted by the BBC in 2017. It has since been recognized on the following American Film Institute lists: 100 Years, 100 Movies at number 93, 100 Years, 100 Laughs at number 20, 100 Years, 100 Passions at number 62, and AFI's 100 Years, 100 Movies 10th Anniversary Edition at number 80. In 1994, it was one of 25 films selected for inclusion in the Library of Congress National Film Registry. The Apartment currently holds a 93% among critics on Rotten Tomatoes, a 94 score on Metacritic, and a 4.4 out of 5 on Letterboxd. So as we normally begin every week, Dad, what is your relationship to the film?
Well, I was trying to think back as to when exactly I first saw the film. You know, it was one of these films that I wanted to see and I didn't get a chance to see. I'll bet you I didn't see it until maybe the mid to late 90s. It was probably one that was on Turner Classic, and I happened to see it and either record it or we watched it. In fact, I probably watched it with you, Chris. for the first time. So I think that's about it. So it's been about 25, 30 years.
And I think I saw it when I was much younger. My parents used to have, well, they had WGN movies, and of course it was a 1960s movie. My parents are very familiar with most of those, and I think it was on, and we watched it when I was much younger. But again, then I didn't watch it until I watched it with you, Dana. So it had to have been again in the mid 90s.
I want to say that I might have watched this in high school, but I don't really recall or remember much of it. If I have a real remembrance or a fondness for the movie, it's probably from the period after I was done with undergrad from college. And I think I've probably seen it 4 or 5 times since then. I remember that we watched this, I think the last time, the three of us, on New Year's Day about a year and a half ago. And that was for our collective like holiday session where we had specific offerings of meals tied with specific movies so that we could mix and match people's different passions for stuff what we were doing with the holidays that year.
We did spaghetti and meatballs.
We did not.
I thought we did.
No, we had something out of the TCM cookbook. It was like cranberry something cheese and turkey sandwiches, which were actually pretty good.
I think I have seen this movie since Dad and I watched it in the mid 90s at least every other year in some way, shape, or form, or I've seen it on something, or Dad and I catch it and we finish watching it. But in some way, shape, or form, I think I've seen it at least every other year.
So, a new question we've been asking on the show this year, and I will forgive our guest who seemingly does not have enough time to listen to her son and her husband's podcast regularly,
Stop.
but Dad, do you like this film?
Yes, I do. That's why I watch it about every other year. So it's a great default movie for us. It doesn't take a lot of, you don't have to think a lot about it. You can be in a fairly good frame of mind. It's got enough humor that it gets you through. So yes, I actually would say this is one of my probably top 20 movies.
Do you have a plot summary ready for us?
I do. C.C. Baxter, Jack Lemmon, an ambitious office clerk at a Manhattan insurance firm, lends his apartment to philandering executives in hopes of climbing the corporate ladder. His plan hits a moral snag when he discovers that Fran Kubelik, Shirley MacLaine, the elevator operator he's fallen for, is having an affair with his boss, Jeff Sheldrake, Fred MacMurray. As Baxter wrestles with loyalty, loneliness, and love, he must decide whether success is worth sacrificing integrity and happiness. A poignant blend of sharp satire and heartfelt romance, The Apartment is a bittersweet portrait of ambition and redemption in the big city.
Thank you. So, our regular question, what is this movie about?
Well, I think this movie has several different themes. I think it speaks to people about loneliness. I think it speaks to people about moral and ethical views of what employers can expect. I think it talks about work-life balance. I think it was one of the first films that really opened people's eyes about that particular subject. And then it opened up, I think, a can of worms or opened up discussion is a better word about mental health illness and problems because obviously she was depressed enough to try to take her own life. And I don't think there had been that many films out there that really put it quite like that. That, she would overdose on those things and then, what happens next. So I think that there are a lot of different themes running through this and about how you can persevere and maybe not win, but you don't come out so bad either.
I think you have a definite splitting of two halves of a whole. You have on one side personal gratification, quote unquote happiness, the life that you want in the present that you feel that you deserve. And then On the other side, it's what you're willing to sacrifice to supposedly get ahead at work. And I think those things have often been in conflict. They come to more of a love triangle, kind of messy degree here, as opposed to the traditional work dynamic where you're delaying gratification. If I spend my Saturday working here now, I will have better times in retirement. It's this trade-off where we sacrifice in our younger years often for the professional success and the things that will buy us later on in life. The freedom and the ability to do things. In this situation, it's much more present that he's not only sacrificing his own moral compass and a sense of delayed gratification because he becomes basically the number two at the company by the end of the movie. But at the same time, he's sacrificing somebody that he really likes and cares about and thinks very fondly of in the process of doing that. And he sees how much it's not only ruining him, but ruining her as well, getting in the undertow of Sheldrake.
Really, this is a dichotomy. What it's talking about is this is the first time the Band-Aid had been ripped off of the beginnings of the sexual revolution of the 60s. This was going on throughout the 50s. Mad Men really kind of, because it was a period piece about the same time, really emphasized this and exposed it, which is there was a lot of the affairs and stuff going on in society in the 40s, 50s, and early 60s that was quite prevalent, in large part because, as some sociologists have written since then, especially in consideration of Mad Men, is that most of these guys had come back from World War II. They'd seen death, and they were going to have as much fun as they could because they didn't know when death was going to happen. And so it kind of exemplified it. And this is the first time I think there's a film that actually shows what was going on. The Christmas party that was implied or talked about in Playboy from when its release in 1953 into the 60s. And so this kind of showed that for what it was in the white collar world, especially in the larger cities, where this kind of activity was going on much more prevalent than we wanted to anticipate or acknowledge. And it did it in a playful way to show not necessarily hyper criticism, but that it was going on and that there was ethical and moral complications associated with it.
See, I take satire to be a critical element. It's using humor and comedy to poke fun at something that is a societal norm, but doing it through a way that makes it look silly or foolish. I know that you say that this movie was scandalous in the moment. It definitely was. It was somewhat revolutionary to unearth some of the truths of society in the moment that it was made. However, 65 years on, this feels a little quaint. I'll be honest. And I think that's probably why Mom enjoys it, is it's somewhat of a time capsule movie that while in the moment it's revolutionary and pushing the boundaries and whatever else, affairs at work and affairs with people that are under your supervisees, the people underneath you, is so rampant and commonplace even yet now that we only had a revolution 8 years ago that even now is still kind of unraveling.
Yeah.
It also talks about the workaholism, or if you want to call it that too. People were working and working and working for what? And because, like you said, they thought that they could get ahead, and you actually see it in this film. I mean, think he didn't have any place else to go, so he might as well work, right? Because people were using his apartment, so where else was he going to be? So I think that's another, like we were talking about this whole work-life balance that people talk about now. Where was that? People were working late at the office, but were they working late? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. And the sad reality is that you don't know. You didn't know. You had to be trusting, right? So, yeah, I think there's a lot of topics that are brought up in a satirical way. Some are sad. The suicidal problems, the depression, the loneliness, and the complications that also causes. And at what lengths people will go to feel appreciated or not lonely.
All right, Dad, did you know? Billy Wilder gave Jack Lemmon free rein to fill in the character of C.C. Bud Baxter in performance. He compared the actor favorably to Charlie Chaplin and thought he could do no wrong. I don't know if I'd go that far, because while there's a lot of physical comedy to Jack Lemmon, I'm not sure it's quite as expressive all the time. And he does a lot with noises and gestures through sound that I don't think are quite the same, but fair enough. Did you know? To create the effect of a vast sea of faces laboring grimly and impersonally at their desks in the huge insurance company office, designers Alexander Tronner and Edward G. Boyle devised an interesting technique. Full-size actors sat at the desks in the front, and children dressed in suits were used at tiny desks toward the rear, followed by even smaller desks with cutout figures operated by wires. It gave the effect of a much larger space than could have been achieved in the limited studio space.
Wow.
That's the creativity of the old days, where they
Yeah, I
had a
was going to
problem
say,
and
out of the box thinking.
innovate your way out. Now that would just be CGI.
Right.
All right, did you know? For this film, Billy Wilder became the first person to win the Academy Awards for Best Picture, Best Director, and Best Original Screenplay. Now, can you name any of the others? I will say there is 1, 2, 3, 4, technically 5, but then there are a few that won adapted screenplay instead of original screenplay, director, and Best Picture.
Kevin Costner.
No. He didn't write.
Ah.
I will say several of these are very new, so they're more modern.
Okay.
Go ahead and guess, Mom, if you have any thoughts.
Well, I was just trying to think of movies that I know that people would have written and directed that would have won something. I mean, I know that like Angelina Jolie has done that, and
Well, the people that are screaming into their headsets or their YouTube algorithm or whatever right now, Sean Baker for Anora this last year.
Sure.
He got not only those 3 awards, but he also won Best Editing because he edited the movie himself. So he's the only one to win 4 for the same movie in the same Oscars. Got a couple of others.
Spielberg for Schindler's?
Spielberg doesn't do his own writing.
Zach Galifianakis.
For what?
I don't know. He does some writing. Who did?
But he's never won a Best Picture, Ma.
Oh, okay. I suppose not. He's mostly comedy.
All right, I'll help you out here. We have one from 2019, we have one from 2022, and we have one from 1977.
77.
I don't.
I'll let you even name the movie instead of the director.
And from 77?
Paul
Correct.
Newman?
No. Paul Newman, I don't believe ever directed. And he definitely didn't direct a Best Picture winner.
I'm blank.
All right, so the one from 1977 is Woody Allen for Annie Hall.
Yeah.
From 2019, you have Parasite and Bong Joon-ho.
Okay.
Well, you can forget that for me.
Well, and Mom's other favorite film of recent history, Daniel Kwan and Daniel Scheinert for Everything Everywhere All at Once.
I don't like that movie either. So.
Yeah.
Now, given how poorly you did at the original screenplay winners, do you have anybody that you think you can name from the list of the adapted screenplay winners, Best Director, and Best Picture? Okay, so hearing no comments there, we have Joseph Mankiewicz for All About Eve from 1950. We have Francis Ford Coppola for The Godfather Part 2 in 1974. We have Richard Benton for Kramer versus Kramer. James L. Brooks for Terms of Endearment.
Okay.
And the most recent version of this, as an adapted winner at both Best Director and writing the screenplay, is No Country for Old Men, the Coen brothers. So there you go. All right. Did you know Jack Lemmon said he learned much about filmmaking from Billy Wilder, particularly the director's use of hooks, quote unquote. Bits of business the audience remembers long after they've forgotten other aspects of the movie. One such hook was the passing of the key to Baxter's apartment. Lemmon said for years after the picture's release, people would come up to him and say, "Hey, Jack, can I have the key?"
Yeah.
I'm trying to think which of us would be the most audacious to do that. It's probably Mom.
Maybe.
All right. Did you know? In the scene where Carl punches Baxter, Jack Lemmon was supposed to mime being punched. He failed to move correctly and was accidentally knocked down. Billy Wilder chose to use the shot of the genuine punch in the film. And finally, did you know the film was lauded by Soviet bloc critics as an indictment of the American system and a story that could have only happened in a capitalistic city like New York? At a dinner honoring him in East Berlin, Billy Wilder said the movie, quote, could happen anywhere in Hong Kong, Tokyo, Rome, Paris, or London. When Wilder said the one place it could not have happened was Moscow, the East Germans broke into thunderous applause and cheers. When the ovation died down, Wilder continued, quote, the reason this picture could not have taken place in Moscow is that in Moscow nobody has his own apartment.
Yeah.
The
Okay.
remark was met with grim silence. All right. So, with that, we will take our first break, and we will be right back.
We're all getting fed up of endlessly scrolling for our next movie fix. So to get passionate about films again, join 3 movie mates on the Never Ending Watchlist movie podcast, where we take you on a movie journey as we seek to build the ultimate movie watchlist.
Seen all of those films are absolute bangers.
Yeah.
Absolute bangers.
Bangers.
I applaud you again, sir.
We deep dive specific movies to find out facts, theories, and funny takes, and ultimately decide whether a movie is worthy of being on the watchlist.
I can't recommend this film.
Ouch.
We'll debate top 5s, rank directors' movies, and interview film fans just like you.
And she is an incredibly complex villain. She's fierce, she's immovable.
So whether you're a casual movie fan or hardened cinephile, we've got plenty for you to enjoy.
I got outvoted by the guy who chose the movie for this episode.
Join me, Damon Carter, Alex Hall, and Cam Young on the Never Ending Watchlist movie podcast every week on Podcast Everywhere.
It's easier to find Cameron on Facebook than it is to find a plot in existence. Right, anyway, for now, it's farewell to Alex.
Before we jump back into the episode, next week for our 268th episode, we welcome our newest guests from the Shoot the Flick podcast, Frankie Sparks and Scott Eisenberg, to discuss another of the 1960 Best Picture nominees, with Elmer Gantry from 1960 celebrating its 65th anniversary. Written and directed by Richard Brooks, cinematography by John Alton, music by Andre Previn, starring Burt Lancaster, Gene Simmons, and Shirley Jones. You won't want to miss that one, so watch ahead of the show by searching the Real Good app to find where it's streaming for you. That's REELGOOD. All right, since Mom doesn't really have anything to promote, I think this is a great time to go back to our monthly segment, or at least was supposed to be our monthly segment, of the GMOAT Hall of Fame.
Well,
We
could take the moment to introduce 2 other people who were with Chris at home.
Really?
They're not really people.
Well, they think they are.
They think
And you
they
both
are.
treat them like they are. Yes, for all the people watching on YouTube, you will see 2 black canine figurines that are behind.
What is
Maggie.
there? That is
Yes,
Maggie.
that is
Max.
the infamous Maggie.
Max, turn around, smile for the camera.
We have storms going through, and Max does not like storms.
No, and he's like facing away, so we'll have to see if we can catch him. Max,
He's a big prissy boy.
Max, Maximilian, turn around. He's sitting stoically upright, facing the opposite direction. Max, he's scared. He heard the
It's
thunder.
fine. So anyway, now that we've introduced the entire audience to your dogs, let's move on to something that I think is much more universally appreciated, and that would be the GMOAT Hall of Fame. So far, just a quick recap of who is in the Hall of Fame so far from this year. We have producers Steven Spielberg and George Lucas. We have directors Steven Spielberg, Alfred Hitchcock. And then we have actors James Stewart, Harrison Ford, Morgan Freeman, Matt Damon, Brad Pitt, Tom Hanks. We also have voted down at least one actress and one producer on the last time that we did this in May. And we have yet to nominate a screenwriter, yet to nominate a cinematographer. We have two composers in the group so far, John Williams and Dmitri Tiomkin. And finally, we also have a costume designer in Edith Head. We also have yet to nominate an art director. That will change tonight. So, Dad, for your consideration here, I have a writer, I have a director, I have an art director, and I have another composer. Which would you like first?
Give me the composer.
All right. We have Bernard Herrmann, who is responsible for Psycho, The Birds, Citizen Kane, The Man Who Knew Too Much, the U.S. version.
Yes.
Vertigo, North by Northwest, and Taxi Driver.
Okay.
So, should he be included? I am yes.
Should.
Yeah.
Yes.
From the birds alone.
Well, I think Taxi Driver might be his best score of any of those. Although the shower scene from Psycho.
Yeah.
And then North by Northwest is also a great score, but I still think Taxi Driver's just got that kind of like haunting horn section going for it. Anyway. All right, so we have Bernard Herrmann now added for this month. So he will be added to John Williams and Dmitri Tiomkin as the third composer in our Hall of Fame. So, Dad, which nominee do you want next?
Art
direction. Okay. This person, and I don't even have all of his movies here because he literally worked in the art department or as some form on set design and construction and whatever on literally 1,016 films from about like the 20s to late 1950s. And that is Cedric Gibbons. He is at least responsible for these 6, and I thought there was a 7th that I might have missed, but Bad Day at Black Rock, The Philadelphia Story, Gaslight, The Wizard of Oz, A Night at the Opera, and Singing in the Rain.
I think that has to be included. Yes.
He would be our first art direction inductee, and I also say yes. So that is our first included art director into the group. We still have yet to get an actress, a writer, a cinematographer, and yeah, that's just it. So writer, cinematographer, and actress are the only 3 categories that we have yet to fill out.
How do you not have an actress?
We just haven't had enough individual actresses appear 5 times on the show. So for the sake of my mother, who clearly has not watched or listened to the show in several months, enshrinees have to have been on 5 different films that we have discussed during the entirety of the show. And it can't be like the same film 3 times like we've done for Casablanca or we're about to do with Jaws in a couple of weeks. It has to be 5 different films.
Okay.
So we just have not had an actress appear enough times. I think the closest, other than we voted down, well, Dad voted down Carrie Fisher the last time we were on. The closest we've gotten to another actress, I think, is Julia Roberts. She just hasn't got her 5th film on our list yet. So we have a director and we have a writer yet.
I would do the writer.
And that would be Billy Wilder. This is his 5th different movie we are covering of his. Double Indemnity, Stalag 17, Sunset Boulevard, Some Like It Hot, and now The Apartment. We will be covering The Lost Weekend later this year, and we have an Ace in the Hole on tap for next year.
Yes.
Yeah, I didn't figure you'd have a problem with that one.
No. And I would assume he's also the director.
That is correct.
And yes.
Yeah, I also figured you wouldn't have a problem with that one. So he will be our second dual nominee or dual inductee behind Steven Spielberg, who's in as a director and a producer. He will be in as a director and a writer because I believe he wrote every single one of his own directed movies. So we have for our June 2025 class, Billy Wilder in both director and writer. We have Cedric Gibbons for art direction, and we have Bernard Herrmann in composer. So another nice little class there. So we're working on a decent Hall of Fame so far We would like to get some actress credits in there and certainly fill out with cinematography and such. I think the closest ones we have right now are Gordon Willis and Roger Deakins, who are like the two greatest cinematographers ever, but we'll see if we can fill out a cinematographer credit here shortly.
Bernard Toland shouldn't be very far off either.
Greg Toland. Greg Toland unfortunately passed away too early. So some of his films, I mean, he's got Citizen Kane, he's got The Best Years of Our Lives, but I don't know if we've covered enough of his films because, again, he passed away really prematurely. Mm-hmm. But I'll take a look. I'll keep that in mind for our next trip through here. So, all right, that will cover us for the June edition of that. For a second there, I thought Mom had completely disappeared, like she left the room.
No, Max is hyperventilating.
So, all right, we left off when discussing The Apartment now. At best performance, Dad, who do you have down?
I have Billy Wilder.
No shock there, as I do as well.
The pacing, the writing, the whole script, everything about it. This is really his vehicle, even though the actors are performing well within it, but they're performing within a stage he created.
It kind of combines both of the genres that he's famous for, his comedies, with a little bit of the noirish mystery kind of aspect to it. So it's kind of got both of those backgrounds, and then you add in kind of the love triangle as the third element of what he really likes to pick on. And I think it is a culmination of a lot of the different things he'd been playing around with for, at this point, probably close to 18 years. But given the success of it, not only critically, but popularity-wise at the time, it would be hard to deny, especially because we overly reward directors in this category, and particularly directors who also do their own writing, that his overall effect on the film is just too big to say that it's probably anybody else. Now, I'm very prepared for Mom to say Jack Lemmon.
I don't ever really look at the directors. If I'm going to talk about a performance, I'm going to talk about somebody who's on the stage. But yes, absolutely. I think he steals the show.
He is incredibly engaging as Baxter in this movie. I think you naturally want to root for him because he's kind of like the lovable loser.
And maybe it's too cliche, but I think of him as the everyman, right? He's Joe Smith, right?
No, see, I don't find him to be
the common guy, just trying to make a buck and live his life.
I think he's able to be relatable, but I don't know if he's the everyman because he's got too much of a neuroticism to him to be everybody's like doppelganger. But instead, I think it's everybody knows somebody like Jack Lemmon.
Okay.
But he's very charismatic. I have him in my best secondary performance because obviously he's got to carry the movie almost from start to finish. I think he's in just about every scene or near about. I think there's a couple of cut scenes where he's not in it because we have a couple of other, well, I guess the scenes between MacLaine and MacMurray, and then there's a couple of scenes where you have the affairs going on in the apartment that he's not a part of.
The scene with MacMurray and Edie Adams.
And yeah, then also the two executives when the brother-in-law comes into the office. I guess, but he's still in it for 85% of the film. And he's got a lot on his shoulders because you have to find him likable. You have to understand the choices that he's making. You want to be able to put yourself in his shoes and understand the dilemma he's now presented with, and that it's not too unusual for you. But at the same time, you've got to also keep him a little bit at arm's length so as not to like pull yourself completely in. So it's a little bit of a magic trick. Dad, who did you have as best secondary?
I had Jack Lemmon.
So 2 for 2. Mom, who was your best secondary?
I have Shirley MacLaine. I did some research and realized that she wasn't really well known until after this movie. That she had been in a couple of other films, but this was kind of her breakout film. So, and with that, I think she did a really phenomenal job of not overacting, considering what she was trying to portray, and that it was believable. So I think she did a fantastic job.
She definitely straddled a great line between kind of feeling lovesick and then at the same time dazed and confused. Like there's kind of a back and forth where she wants to be with Sheldrake and she says she's in love with him, but she's also seemingly disillusioned by the whole situation. She knows it's never going to completely work, but then she's enticed by it when it seemingly does, and he does technically leave his wife, which she left him.
Right, exactly.
And then she somehow comes around and out of her dazed and confused nature by ending up in Baxter's apartment and him taking care of her, realizing that he's the nice guy that she's probably deserving of in the end, but she doesn't necessarily come to that completely on her own.
And for all that Fred MacMurray is, I never feel a chemistry between those two to start with. He was always at, come close, but don't get too close. And so I always wondered how she could be falling in love with somebody who she couldn't really get close to. And he really had no intention. I mean, it's one of the quotes that I have here about, you take a girl out a couple times a week for some laughs and suddenly she thinks you're going to leave your wife, So he definitely wasn't as interested in her as she was in him.
Understatement.
Correct. I think she did a really good job of also knowing her own mind, a woman who realizes what's happening to her and can be distraught about it, well, to the point of suicide, but then coming out of it and knowing her own mind and in the end making the better choice.
Most charismatic, I have Dr. Dreyfus. I think he's the funny next door neighbor who's a little bit crotchety. He's definitely got his quirks and his mannerisms, such as every time he walks into his own apartment, he's hearing what's going on, screaming at his wife that, oh, he's at it again. But he's kind of got that little like quirkiness to him that's somewhat ethnic. And he's set up to be kind of this comic relief, even though he plays a very important role in it. And I think it was a well-deserved supporting actor nomination here for Jack Crucian.
He was a long time character actor in Hollywood in the 50s and 60s. And this was probably his most notable role. But I mean, you couldn't watch a sitcom or one of the many little dramas, legal shows without seeing him on it at one time during the season. So for me, most charismatic, I have the man who is so good at being two-faced and lousy and hated, Fred MacMurray. I mean, whether it's Double Indemnity or the Cane Mutiny and now The Apartment, he has got the ability to be a pleasant, cheerful guy and then turn around and be just a slime ball. And both are incredibly believable. But I will give a runner up to a favorite of mine, Ray Walston. I just always love Ray Walston and almost everything he does. I think although his best role was in the Sting.
Mom, who did you have?
I have Jack Lemmon. I just think this whole bumbling guy, and he can go from, being down and out to humming in his kitchen, throwing the spaghetti through the tennis racket, and like I said, he just encompasses that whole character and really gives life to the movie.
So yet again, repeating, you like neurotic, ambitious, quirky men.
Maybe.
You have a type. Moving on, let's go to best scene then. I have 5 nominees here. I have kind of the cold open where we open with the narration and kind of the explanation, the exposition of everything that's going on. It introduces you both to his work world and his afterlife world. Then I have meeting Sheldrake, which is the first time that he goes to see Fred MacMurray as his boss. Kind of reveals that he knows what's going on, but now he wants all the favors for himself. Then I have the Christmas party. I have sleeping pills, which I will extend this both from the point where she takes them to when he finds her, and all the way up until the doctor basically leaves because they've gotten her past the point where she's really going to have a problem. And then finally, I have Matushka, which is the brother-in-law walks in and sees them supposedly about to have dinner and knocks him out. So, any other scenes that you'd like to nominate?
The washroom key and that whole scenario leading up to the climax.
Where he quits his job.
Yep, the washroom key, and then he quits.
Well, Tom, you encompassed a lot of, from the sleeping pills until the brother gets there. But my favorite part is when he decides that he's going to make dinner for her, and he suddenly turns on all of his charm, and he's dancing around the kitchen and, humming and actually excited about preparing dinner for her, and, says, "Oh, there's something exciting about having dinner for two." And she says, "Oh, you have dinner often for two?" And he says, "No, sometimes Ed Sullivan." That whole scene where before the brother comes in and all of that, I just think he was just so happy to have her there. And of course he had already figured out that he was in love with her, and it's just cute.
All right, so out of these, Cold Open, Meeting Sheldrake, Christmas Party, Sleeping Pills, Making Dinner, Matushka, and Washroom Key, what is the best scene?
I have Sleeping. I think it's the most revealing of the characters themselves. It's the most intimate portion of the thing, and it really kind of is the climax of where the film is going and what's happening. It changes the dynamics from being just the apartment and, the shack up place to being something more. A relationship brewing between Baxter and Kubelik.
See, I would say that the relationship only develops after that point, but I still also have the Sleeping Pills scene as my best because I think Mom kind of got on this earlier and it stuck with me a little bit. The personal cost and the stakes got raised so high very quickly in that moment where she takes the sleeping pills and you've already developed somewhat of a connection between them. You know that there's a budding relationship, that he clearly likes her and she's kind of an innocent girl that's getting caught up in Sheldrake's just terribleness.
Using her.
And so by that extent, when she decides to take her own life in this dramatic way, and then by the time you get to Dreyfus and Lemmon walking her around the apartment, it just kind of really sinks home the personal cost that's going on here of him loaning out this apartment. It's no longer just his personal ambition on the line, but it's also the sacrifice that others might have to make for his ambition. And so for me, that's the pivot point in the movie, not just from an emotional standpoint, but just a weight and a stakes point in this movie.
I guess I had contributed to this, and I totally agree that whole length of scene and the cost, the direness of what these people are all doing and what that cost actually could be when they realize that all is for naught is super pivotal. And, at one point she's laying there and he says, "Well, you could have died." And she said, "Who would care?" And he said, "Well, I would." I think that really brings home, these two lonely people, and what they're really looking for is someone to care about them.
Favorite scene for me, I have Matushka, or the brother-in-law, when he walks into the apartment. It's got some of the best comedy for me of the entire thing because you could definitely understand how everybody would be mistaken about what's going on there. It looks so innocent from your perspective because you know everything of the backstory and the context of what's led up to that point. But the brother-in-law just walking in, and then he's a hothead who clearly is that kind of New Yorker style of "I'm gonna knock your block off" type of guy. and then finally punching him when he tries to be noble and kind of gallant. I just really enjoy that moment in the film.
I love the scene where the doctor catches him just outside of his door and asks him if he can donate his body to the university for scientific research after hearing all these multitude of, women going in and out of his apartment. And of course, him thinking that he's shacking up with all of them. So
For me, it's the cold open, because I don't see a film that so draws you into the characters and sets the scene so abruptly and clearly as that does. And so I think it's just a phenomenal way of setting it up and introducing to everybody involved.
And then most indelible moment for me is also the sleeping pills scene.
mine is, who would care? I would.
Mine is the washroom key. It's the moment where no matter what happens, you finally reach a point where your moral compass exceeds your ambition.
Well, that looks like a great spot for our second break. We will be right back. Before we jump back into the episode, and before we get to the Stanley Rubric in a minute, if you're ever curious about our Master Greatest Movies of All Time list that has every graded movie we've ever discussed on the show, there's a link in the episode description of every episode of this show, or you can go to RonnieDuncanStudios.com/GMOAT podcast and find it as the top entry on the Greatest Movie of All Time podcast show page. That is the grades we've done so far for all 241 movies we've graded, and we continue to add more each week. Make sure to check that out as we go and follow along. Dad, do we have anyone to remember this week?
Yes. Clifton Jones, 87, Jamaican British actor. Space, 1999. Watership Down, China Moon. Betsy Gay, 96, American actress. The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, Our Gang Follies of 1938. Anne Burrell, 55, American chef and television personality. Secrets of a Restaurant Chef, Worst Cooks in America, Iron Chef America.
And we did also have one other person that was unfortunately added to the list very late on in the week, but David Hekili Kanui Bell, 46, American actor. He was just in the Lilo and Stitch live action movie that was released a couple of weeks ago. He was also credited with appearances in Hawaii Five-0 and Magnum P.I. And so we recognize these here for all their contributions with a moment of silence in their honor. Thank you. Now, briefly, before we get to our best, funniest lines and make that awkward transition, I would like to read a fan message that we got that I just saw during the break. So, 1 second here, but this is from our favorite Aussie superfan, Eliza. Hey, my favorite two movie buffs. I am on the road and just finished your Inside Out episode. See photo evidence of bush and steering wheel on the correct side of the car. I was worried at first. My psych degree and work with children with trauma made me worry that two lawyers may not get how brilliant this movie was for all people. But you guys nailed it. Not only did you do a good review, but it was awesome to hear two blokes understand how valuable a movie about emotions and the connections between emotions and memories actually is. This movie was groundbreaking in my field and still a great tool to use. It was awesome to see it's valued by all. Great job and another great episode. Thank you very much, Eliza. We appreciate the feedback. And I will say that even Andrew Corns had nothing but positive things to say about our placement on the overall list. He had no issues with our scoring whatsoever. It might be a rarity, and that also must mean that we need to do an immediate revisit because we just can't be in that much agreement there.
Yeah.
So anyway, now let's move to best funniest lines. I have the first one up here. CC Baxter. The mirror, it's broken. Kubelik. Yes, I know. I like it that way. Makes me look the way I feel.
Baxter. You know, I used to live like Robinson Crusoe. I mean, shipwrecked among 8 million people. And then one day I saw a footprint in the sand, and there you were.
My sleigh is double parked.
That's the way it crumbles, cookie-wise.
Kubelik. He's a taker. Baxter, a what? Kubelik, some people take, some people get took, and they know they're getting took, and there's nothing they can do about it.
The doctor, I don't want to gloat, but just between us, you had it coming to you. You're gonna have a shiner tomorrow. Baxter, don't bother, Doc. Doesn't hurt a bit.
Kubelik, when you're in love with a married man, you shouldn't wear mascara.
Why do people have to love people anyway?
Baxter and Kubelik are having a small drink, and Baxter asks if she would like more at the Christmas party. She says, I shouldn't drink while I'm driving. Baxter says, by the power invested in me, I hereby declare this elevator out of order. Shall we join the natives? They seem friendly enough. Baxter, don't you believe it? Why, after a while there will be human sacrifices, white-collar workers tossed into computing machines and punching them full of those little square holes. Kubelik, how many drinks did you have? 3, but he's using 4 fingers.
Sheldrake, you know, you see a girl a couple of times a week just for laughs, and right away they think you're going to divorce your wife. Now I ask you, is that fair? Baxter, no, sir, it's very unfair, especially to your wife.
Kubelik, just because I wear a uniform doesn't make me a Girl Scout.
Is that what you wish Mom would say to you?
Oh, okay.
So I have Sheldrake. Have you seen The Music Man? You can have both tickets. I'm not just giving these tickets, I'm going to swap them. Baxter, swap them for what? Pause. Sheldrake, it also says here you are alert, astute, and quite imaginative. Baxter, digs in his pocket for the key. That's good thinking, Baxter.
Kubelik, I'd like to spell it out for you, only I can't spell.
At the bar, woman, how do you feel about Castro? Baxter, what is Castro? Woman, you know that big shot down in Cuba with the crazy beard? Baxter, what about it? The woman, 'cause as far as I'm concerned, he's a no good fink. 2 weeks ago I wrote him a letter. He never ever answered.
Since she skipped you, Dad.
Yeah, well, I've been interrupted a lot through the years, but that's okay. Dr. Dreyfus, I don't know what you did to that girl in there, and don't tell me, but it was bound to happen. The way you carry on. Live now, pay later. Diners Club. Why don't you grow up, Baxter? Be a mensch. You know what that means? Baxter, I'm not sure. A mensch, a human being. So you got off easy this time. So you were lucky. Baxter, yeah, wasn't I?
My last one, Sylvia. You mean you bring other girls up here? Kirkaby, certainly not. I'm a happily married man.
Kubelik, what's a tennis racket doing in the kitchen? Baxter, tennis racket. I remember I was cooking myself an Italian dinner. Baxter, I use it to strain the spaghetti.
I don't have any more.
I'm out as well.
Baxter, it's a wonderful thing, dinner for 2. Kubelik, do you usually eat alone? Baxter, oh no, sometimes I have dinner with Ed Sullivan, sometimes Dinah Shore or Perry Como. The other night I had dinner with Mae West. Of course, she was much younger then. And I'm out.
All right. Let's move to the Stanley Rubric then. Legacy is up first. This is a measure of the legacy of the movie approximately 5 years after it came out. So 1965 to today. Over the last 60 years, how has this movie endured in its legacy between both two different groups? And that'd be the industry and the audience. 5 and 5 points for a total of 10. Dad, would you like to go first or second?
I'll go first. I think legacy is as follows. Industry, I give it 5 points. And the reason I do that is simple, because between 1955 and 1959, Jack Lemmon did no films. He was nominated for Best Supporting for playing Ensign Pulver, but did not do another film until Some Like It Hot. In 1969, he became basically a leading man. And then I can run off. Here is Jack Lemmon's filmography of the 1960s.
So I think you've gotten some of your dates wrong here. So first off, I think Mr. Roberts that we covered in season 1 was from 1957. Some Like It Hot is from 1959, not 1969.
Excuse me if I said that, then I'm wrong. No, it was
Okay,
50.
and then
It
this-
was 55 because I looked it all up.
Okay. Anyway, and then this is 1960. So now, please continue.
So this is 1960. Wackiest Ship in the Army, Notorious Landlady, and then he did The Days of Wine and Roses, Irma Deluxe, Under the Yum Yum Tree, Good Neighbor Sam, How to Murder Your Wife, The Great Race, The Fortune Cookie, which was his first big pairing with Walter Matthau, Love, The Odd Couple, Short, The April Fool, and The Out of Towners. He just went on a run every year. He was doing 1 or 2 big films. And I think this film really established him as a leading man in Hollywood. And for that matter, Shirley MacLaine had a rather nice career in the early to mid 60s as well. She did Children's Hour. She was in Irma Deluxe with Jack Lemmon, 63. She did another film, Please Come Home, which was a Cold War comedy. So she had a nice run as well. And I think that's a big part. So that's a 5 for me, just by the fact that the industry, there was a staying power with these two actors that traversed, I guess is the best word, traversed through the 1960s. For the public, this film is not as well known anymore and kind of faded after about a decade as far as being highly regarded or highly well known. It's held in high regard by the industry just by the sheer fact of where it's ranked in some of the categories. But I can't give it anything higher than a 4, though, for long term. So I'm at a 5 and a 4. So I am at a 9 overall for the first category.
So I'm not going to go terribly different. I also have a 5 for the industry. Really nothing to add to that conversation. I take all of your points, but I don't think there are going to be too many people that argue that it has a high industry recognition among critical and the historic nature of Hollywood. I mean, it's a Best Picture winner that's from a highly renowned director starring multiple people that had long, successful careers. I don't think you're going to get any pushback there. My pushback for you is that I think you're overplaying your hand yet again, where you're subjectively moving stuff either up or down based on how much you like the movie, because there's no way in a conversation where you dislike the movie, you'd have a 4 on that end based on what the recognition for this movie is. I know we didn't do our straw poll in the office this week because we didn't have our staff meeting like we normally do on Mondays. But I think if you polled everybody, there would be barely a recognition of what this movie is among the general public. And I don't think there are too many people that even know who Shirley MacLaine or Jack Lemmon are under the age of 30. So it's going to be really difficult to convince me that this is worthy of a 4 on that end. I have a 3 because I give it credit for the cinephiles or the film fans that almost universally will have seen this movie, but not a general audience bump to get it up to a 4. It's not that kind of movie.
Well, and quite frankly, let me just put it this way. Every couple of weeks, you criticize me for not taking into account the fact that this is a well-regarded movie among cinephiles. And so now all of a sudden you've changed your tune and said, oh, well, our straw poll at the office has more weight.
No,
so
that is
I'll
not
go
what
down
I
a
said.
little. I'll go to a 3.5 because I do agree with you to some extent, but you're criticizing me for the very reason or things that you've done on repeated occasions.
You're yet again, not listening to me because I consistently made the same criticism. That's why I'm at a 3 when I talked about the cinephiles. That's the backing that I went with. You often are, oh, this is a 1 because nobody's seen it or heard of it, or it's a 2. And now you've jumped up to a 4, which to me, when you get to a 4, you're talking about not that like universally everybody has seen this movie. It's not, what's a recent movie that a lot of people have seen? Gladiator was one where we got to like the 4.5, 5 level because it's got some recency to it. It's got some name recognition to it. Titanic would be on that list. Avatar would be on that list of movies people would instantly recognize by a name recognition. If you said The Apartment to a mass general audience, I don't think anybody's going to know necessarily what you're talking about. It's somewhat of a generic name. It's 65 years old. And so I think 3 is a fairly good barometer where you have people who will have seen it if they took a film class in college, or people who are completionists or have watched TCM, but it's also not oversaturating it to say that it's like a very wide audience, like some other movies that obviously have a higher brand or name recognition, even from this era.
Okay, guys, I have a 3.5 in that area with the 5 with the whole industry thing as well. So, because when I was looking all of this up and I was doing research on it, because I like the film, that doesn't mean everybody else does, but I found an article from 2024 from a film critic who said that people should still be buying and owning this film just because it was way ahead of its time with some of its themes, but yet people don't know about it unless there's people like us who talk about it and convince people that they should give it a try. So like I said, for audience, if you can get somebody to watch it, they'll agree that it's a terrific film. It's the recognition because it's so far removed. But if you say Jack Lemmon, there are still people who know who that is. Shirley MacLaine still has a name for herself. They're like, okay.
That's why I put it under 30, because the kids who are in their 30s grew up on Lamb Chop.
Right. Okay. So that's Sherry. That's not Shirley. That's Sherry
Lewis.
Not Shirley MacLaine.
Yeah.
Why do I? Okay.
You know, this is a movie that I could.
Sorry, I thought they were the same person.
No.
Shirley MacLaine and Sherry Lewis. Oh my. That is so precious. Oh God.
Can I tease him about that later?
Yes, you
the
can.
Same thing?
Yes.
It'll be on the show. I'm leaving it in.
Oh,
it's an honest mistake.
Boy, am I going to have fun with Mr. Corns discussing this.
Oh, yes, I'm sure.
Well, anyway, I ended up with an 8.5 for the total because I agree. I wish more people would see this film. I don't think it deserves necessarily a remake, but I think you could sort of extrapolate and make a more current film about people who aren't seen at work, about people who are used. You wouldn't have to have necessarily the same scenario, but I think you could make an up-to-date film using some of the same premises.
So that's an 8.33 average between the three of us. Let's move to impact and significance. This is a measure of the impact and significance of the film within the first 5 years that it came out. So roughly 1960 to 1965. What is the impact among the audience and the industry at the time? We add these 5 and 5 points for a total of 10 again here. Realistically, I think you could probably borrow a lot of the arguments Dad already made for Legacy that probably more belong in impact and significance when you're talking about careers within a short period of time shortly after the movie and people being set up for more long-term success and getting on a roll, things of that nature. Obviously, the awards attention, the critical acclaim at the time, I really don't have any objection to going a full 5 on the industry side of this, and I would find it probably very difficult to argue on that end. The only place that I would take it just slightly off is in the audience side. I only have it at a 4.5, again, reserving the full 10s in this category for certain movies that you kind of know what a 10 looks like, and this isn't quite a 10. It's not Titanic. It's not The Sound of Music. It's not The Godfather. It's not Gone with the Wind. Those are the reserved 10s where you knew in the moment, those were a huge deal. They changed a lot of things. You know what a 10 is and what it looks like. And so I have this at a 4.5 and thus a 9.5 overall.
And I'm going to argue with you about that because of all of the themes that were never really discussed before that came out of this film.
That is for classicness, not impact and
No.
significance.
Well, I
You're
don't know.
blending
I think it
categories.
has a lot to do with the impact of the film. So
Yet again, our rogue scorer coming in here.
anyway, I don't have a 10. I only had 4 for the industry, 5 for the audience because of those different things, because it takes an honest look at, the work life, and that they were talking about all of the faceless employees, the slaves to the company, the loneliness factor that people had, and that had never really been discussed before. So I came in at a 9 for impact and significance. It opened the door for other films to explore those topics.
Only a Duncan would argue so vociferously to end up with a score lower than the person they were arguing with.
You came up with what score?
A 9.
A 9.
Okay.
Hey, at least after 15 appearances, her 16th appearance, she's finally gotten behind the split category scoring.
Industry is a 5. I mean, the number of nominations, let alone the number of wins, was substantial. Okay, for the public, boy, and I understand your points. I wrestled back and forth between 4.5 and 5. I mean, it was 5th. It had roughly $18 million in box office. And the reason I finally went with a 4.5 is because even though it was ranked higher, when you look at the top 2, even the top 3, Swiss Family Robinson beat it by twice, Psycho almost by twice, and Spartacus by at least 80%. So I just have a hard time going more than 4.5 for that reason, for the public. So I'm at a 9.5 as well.
So that's a 9.33 average between the three of us. Let's move to novelty. This is a category that is split again between 5 and 5 points. 5 points awarded for the originality of anything having to do with the movie, and an additional 5 points based on the execution by everyone in, around, or working on the movie. So this will add up to a total of 10. Who would like to start?
I will go. Originality. This is so novel and fresh. There was nothing like it. I mean, tackling the sociological aspect of The Office and the number of affairs and how relationships were and what was going on in society at that time. It's a 5. There's nothing, as far as I can tell, that would even rival it as far as the way it was presented. The only problem I have is, and I can't give the execution a 4.5, is there, even with Wyler's direction, there's just some spots in here that I found were a little uneven, that the script wasn't quite as well developed. It was a lot of the directorial aspects of it. So there was a couple of points where it was a little slow to me. And so I can't give it a perfect 5. So I'm going to give it a 4.5 because there's just some things. And I happen to find several critics, including somebody who wrote a review in the New Yorker at the time of its release, who said basically the same things I thought, which is there's a few points where it kind of got a little slow. So I'm going to go with a 9.5 overall.
You and I have an identical score in both the breakdown and in the total number. I also have a 5 for the novelty. I kind of bandied about going a 4.5, but it'd be really hard, given the historical context that I'm aware of, to say that this was anything other than scandalous at the time that it came out. And to me, when you have something that's that provocative in its moment, that speaks of originality. So I will go a full 5 on that. I also, too, believe that in an execution side, I think it's a very well executed movie, but it's just not operating quite at the same level of a few other Billy Wilder classics to me that are just a slight bit higher in execution level. One of those being one we've covered. Double Indemnity to me is like a 5 execution scale where he's humming on all cylinders. He's got it completely under his control. Every actor seems to be doing exactly as indicated in the Wilder script instead of kind of doing their own thing occasionally. And there are just some small tweaks in this that I would make to just say it's not quite at that level. So I also have a 9.5.
I agree with both of you on many of your different points. I know that the cinematography in here, the article that I read that really brought that to light was this one that I read by Roger Ebert about the widescreen black and white. The black and white dampens down the jollity that might sweep in with decorations of the Christmas parties, the bars, the restaurants, the holidays. It emphasizes the bleakness of their situations. And I actually gave it an 8 for Novelty.
And how do you break that down?
I didn't break that one down this time.
Okay. Well, I guess we were high enough to keep the average somewhat high because that's going to be a 9 average between the three of us. Moving on to Classicness. This is a measure of how well the movie was either ahead of its time, how well it's aged, how well it hasn't aged, whether it is still somewhat classic to today. All of those things are in play here. Normally I let Dad start, but I'm just going to throw out my 10 as the baseline because I think this movie was ahead of its time, and that's why it feels a little bit quaint. But that also can lead to a certain level of endearing quality and classicness to it that it feels somewhat of a relic, even though in the moment it was scandalous. And I will also give it some points up for its just level of timelessness. It's 65 years on. I think that's well deserved. There are people in here that I think are very classic in their portrayals, how they're responding. Some of the portrayals are still caricatures of things that we've done in other things that have moved on since then, such as Jack Lemmon has kind of a archetype to the type of character that he's playing that eventually would go on to other people that would take on that. One of which I would certainly will not mention here, given his, let's say, infamous notoriety at this point in time, but certainly did mention him many times as being a inspiration for him. And then I also would say that a lot of the issues and themes that are being discussed here are pretty universal, still stuff that we're uncovering, unpacking to today. The workplace relationships, power dynamics, things of that nature. So I'm at the full 10.
I also had a 10 for all the same reasons and the things that I've stated previously about all the different themes that we have in here that are still problematic today.
All right, Dad, don't let me down. You have a 9.5.
No, I don't. Okay. This is the problem. The very nature of what made this really revolutionary is also the problem that I'm having with it, which is this is all about sex and power and bosses having relations with their secretaries and the other employees.
So you're not having a
dynamics.
relationship, a sexual relationship with your office manager?
As I wear the company logo, right?
Okay. I'm not trying to be funny. I'm trying to be serious about this. So the fact that Kubelik gets pinched in the elevator and she's getting harassed by people in the elevator over and over. I mean, the fact that she's having the boss, the guy who's in charge of personnel of the company is hitting on her and he's using his position for that. And
Okay.
he's, it's the same thing. So I can't give it the 10.
That's horseshit because it's in no way promoting that attitude. In fact, it's shining a light and saying this isn't good behavior. So how is that not classic?
Except that this wouldn't happen anymore. There would be HR issues. They would be bringing up on sexual assault allegations. Sheldrake would be fired by now because there's no way that 4 employees would have at least turned him over to HR.
Okay.
So I can't give it a 10. I'm going to give it a 9 because I can't go all the way because of that.
Over the last 8 years, I'd be willing to buy that argument a little bit more. But up until about 8 years ago, again, not that long ago, that was still pretty rampant. Like, let's not be naive here that this isn't still going on and there's still power dynamic relationships and bad things happening to people every day in America.
I understand, but I can't give it a 10 for classicness based on that and the way things have definitely gone, especially since Me Too.
Okay, fine. So we have a 9.67 here for classicness. Rewatchability. Insert whatever subjective test you guys decide that you want to go with. Mom, we'll start with you in your 10.
I don't have a 10, actually.
Okay, so then what
Okay.
do you have?
I have an 8. Because of some of the themes in here, sometimes if you stop to think about it, it's a lot to handle. But I love how he gets what he needs most. You know, he gets out of his moral dilemmas and he gets the girl. And I think everybody likes a happy ending. And when she just says, shut up and deal the cards, you know that he's getting the happy ending that he deserves for being just such a nice guy. So, you know, I do watch this, like I said, every other year, and I would be happy to watch it again tomorrow. But I think that some of the themes may be more difficult for people to watch over and over. So I gave it an 8.
Some people play double for a happy ending.
Yes, they're named Robert Kraft.
Well, for rewatchability, I'm at 7.5, which is about where I generally put it. If it's a film that I will watch on a regular basis, not constantly. There's some films that I will rewatch. I don't rewatch a ton of films, but there are films that I will rewatch just because they're some of my favorites. I mean, I'll rewatch Blazing Saddles. I'll rewatch North by Northwest. I'll rewatch Rio Bravo every year, if not every 9 months. That's going to be a higher number. This is one I will rewatch, so I'm at a 7.5 because that's about my benchmark for a film that I'll rewatch on a consistent basis, but not on a regular basis.
All right, you're going to make the math extremely easy on me, which, as you know, is always a favorite of mine.
Yes.
I've been trying to take the more objective approach all season to this category to give at least a little bit more nuance or removed nature from the subjective scores. Like, unless they're apparently a Duncan bro, Ocean's 11 probably should not have a 10 for rewatchability because that does not apply to the general population, as Mom shakes her head for all those on audio. So, with that in mind, I don't think The Apartment necessarily will appeal to everyone. I think it is a very good story. I think it is a fairly well done movie. It is a classic by most opinions, even to a degree, even yours, Dad. But I would say that it's also a little bit older. The fact that it's black and white might be somewhat off-putting to a few people here or there. So I think objectively, it's not terribly long, which helps. I would say this is probably about a good 7. So that will leave us at a 7.5 average between the three of us. For audience score on this one, we had an 87% for Google users and an 89% for Rotten Tomato users, giving us an 8.8. So to repeat the categories, we had an 8.33 for Legacy, a 9.33 for Impact and Significance, 9 for Novelty, a 9.67 for Classicness, because Dad had to ruin it, a 7.5 for Rewatchability, and an 8.8 for Audience Score, giving us a final total of 52.63, and currently placing it on our list between Jurassic Park and The Matrix at number 22.
Good spot.
I was not sure where this one would place, and I certainly didn't think it would be quite this high. I thought this would be closer to like the 50s or 60s.
I would have thought about 30.
Okay. I mean,
so there's a little higher than I thought.
And I mean, there's not a ton of separation between like the 30s where we have it at 52. So you drop it 0.63 down and it gets into the 30s. You drop it basically a point and it's dropping down to almost 38.40, somewhere in that range. So there's not a huge amount of discrepancy, like small margins when you get to 202 now films on the list become wide rankings differences. So if you have any commentary for us, any commentary at all, we will take any and all of it, negative, positive, whatever. As you know, we did read at least one positive comment on the air, and if you leave a negative comment, well, that's your own prerogative. And certainly, if you want to keep all those YouTube comments coming about Patton Oswalt, I will welcome them all. But you can find us at greatestalltimemoviepodcast@gmail.com. You can find us at GMOAT Podcast on any of our socials. That would include YouTube, Blue Sky, Twitter, Letterboxd. Oh, I'm forgetting several of them here. Instagram. I think there's maybe one or two more that I'm forgetting. TikTok.
Yes.
Can't forget the TikTok for Dad here since he spends so much time on it. And you can also find us on the website, RonnieDuncanStudios.com/GMOAT podcast. Let's go to remaining questions for this one. How do Fran and Baxter explain things to the brother-in-law?
Well, it's one of two things. They say don't question it, or they explain everything.
Boy, I think explaining everything might be worse than just letting it happen, but okay.
But he looks like the good guy. He rescued her. So once
Okay,
they
but
explained everything, everyone loves a
Well,
hero.
the other option would be they go in the middle and they say, nothing happened. I got sick and he took care of me and I should have called and I didn't.
okay. Question 2. Where do Fran and Baxter find new jobs?
I think Baxter's going to have an easy time. When you put that resume together of how meteoric his rise is, and then just say there were things going on in the office that I didn't feel morally were right and that I quit, I think you'll have no trouble finding another job.
Except he can't bring up the whole moral thing because at that time period, that was fairly normal. So some people would say he's going to be a troublemaker. So I think his abilities will get him another job. His personality will get him another job. As far as Fran is concerned, she ran away from Sheldrake, but they never really said she left her job. And all the other women that he'd had affairs with still all working there. So who's to say she didn't continue to work there, at least for a time?
Well, I suppose that's possible, but I just would have a hard time thinking Baxter's not at the company anymore. Sheldrake is somebody she might see on a regular basis. Why would you want to put yourself in that situation further?
Well, she has nowhere else to go, so for now, and I would suppose until she either married him or found something else, she would have to stay.
Yeah, I suppose not being able to spell and really only able to push buttons is not a great skill set.
But most wives do know how to push buttons.
Hey, at least it wasn't me making the joke this time. Question 3. Does Baxter actually leave his apartment? And that by leave, I mean he moves away.
I think he was leaving because he needed, he quit his job. So if he could find another job appropriately, I think he wouldn't leave, especially if maybe there was going to be something going on between the two of them.
No, he's always going to have that memory of Sheldrake and her being in his apartment. It'll be too much for him. He won't stay. He can't.
But he likes his neighbors.
Doesn't matter. It'll be too much for him.
There's a certain nature when you have memories with somebody that you kind of need to escape some of the ghosts that surround a place. I know that, like, I'm not a personal believer in ghosts as in like an actual physical or metaphysical form per se, in the way that some people are. But I do believe in things that haunt us, or memories, or things that have like an oral specter that hang around a place where you have just bad feelings and things that are conjured by that. To a degree, I've had those in my own life. So I can perfectly understand that if he just has certain bad memories, you want to get off on a new foot, find a different apartment.
And I suppose she did commit suicide or try to commit suicide in that apartment. It probably wouldn't be good for her either.
The only way that I would say that you might overlook that is if him becoming closer to her is outweighing the bad memories that are created by everything else that was going on in that apartment. But even then, I still think because she might equally, she's going to start spending more time there, want a fresh start, that just go find a different place. So any remaining questions for either of you?
Yes. How do you confuse an award-winning actress with a ventriloquist with a sock puppet?
I don't know. I just did.
It's okay,
all the
Tom. You
crap
come by
you
that
give me.
honestly.
Wow. You're starting down that road.
Starting down what road?
The one that you accused me of being on.
Which is
the Nomus Infractus, whatever.
So you can't even get the name right. Nomen Infractus.
Nomen
You
Infractus.
hear it so often, you still can't get the name right.
I try to avoid listening.
Yeah, well, you do a great job of that.
What?
Okay, so any actual remaining questions? All right, hearing none, let's move on to final thoughts for the week. Mom, did you catch any good movies on your vacation?
Obviously not.
Not even on the plane for 8 hours?
Yeah, I watched a couple on the plane, but I can't say that they were overly
memorable, apparently.
Memorable, no.
All right. I think for the most part, we've talked about everything that we had in our quiver dead. Oh, no. I take that back. We did go to, why am I drawing a blank? Materialists by Celine Song. Her follow-up on Sunday for Father's Day. Her follow-up to Past Lives from a couple of years ago that I know you were a huge fan of. I was a little bit more mixed on.
Yeah, I enjoyed the film. I don't think it lives up quite to the same level as Past Lives for me. There were flaws in the film, as far as I'm concerned. You and I both discussed the fact that I can't figure out whether Dakota Johnson is just a bad actress or if she's only good if the script is really good.
I think she's just miscast. I don't know if she's just a leading actress, just period. I think she's more suited to be like a supporting role as maybe the best friend more often. And we keep giving her these lead roles that I don't think quite suit her skill set. She's just not that expressive.
Wasn't
and this
she
movie,
in 50 Shades?
Yes.
Okay. And none of us saw that. Saw it.
At least not yet.
Well, and here's the thing. Her mother had such a presence on screen. I don't find her to be that charismatic.
No.
I think in that regard, she takes after her dad, whose career was basically on small screen television. He's only had a few movie parts, and none of them have been highly successful as far as, big stardom on movies. So I think she gets a little bit of a ding as far as charisma from her dad as opposed to her mother. Or, for that matter, who was a much bigger star, her grandmother. And who was? Chris?
I can't remember.
Tippi Hedren.
Oh, yeah.
So I don't know. I enjoyed it out of scale of, I do two different ones. On a scale of 1 to 5 for enjoyment, I would give it a 4. As far as quality of film, I would give it about a 3. So if I had to do it overall, I'm at a 3.25, 3.5 overall.
I think it's a definitely flawed film. I think it has good things that it can say in it, but it's just not executed nearly at the same level of even Past Lives, which even then I had some trouble connecting with. There were parts of the film that I felt very seen by, but there were other parts where I just felt very disconnected. I thought Chris Evans did an amazing job in the film.
Yes.
I think he's really good at really two primary characters. One being the incredible dick, like he is in Knives Out, or even to a degree, Not Another Teen Movie. Or he's really good at being the very earnest guy like he is in Captain America or in this film, where he's kind of a little bit of a lovable loser, but he's very charismatic and effable. And I think he did a fantastic job in this movie. I think Pedro Pascal, while good, he's not doing a huge amount for me in this one. And I also think he's a little bit miscast, but it's still Pedro Pascal. There are much worse people I can see on screen than him, who is clearly having a moment over the last year and a half. So yeah, fine. But either way, it's kind of like when we went to, what was it, Babylon, and we were the only two people in the theater. We weren't the only people in the theater this time, but it was still a day at the movies on Father's Day with my dad, and it wasn't a terrible movie.
I would say it was a better movie than, it was better than 50-50. And so I had a good time.
Exactly. So, but that looks like a good place to stop it for this week. Thank you for listening. Love is the morning and the evening star. Next week, for our 268th episode, we welcome our newest guests from Shoot the Flick, Frankie Sparks and Scott Eisenberg, to discuss another 1960 Best Picture nominee with Elmer Gantry celebrating its 65th anniversary. Written and directed by Richard Brooks, cinematography by John Alton, music by Andre Previn, starring Burt Lancaster, Gene Simmons, and Shirley Jones. You won't want to miss that one, so watch ahead of the show by searching the Real Good app to find where it's streaming for you. That's REELGOOD. Please like, follow, rate, and review, or whatever on whichever platform you have, so that more can join in on our fun. You can also email the show at RonnieDuncanStudios.com or at GreatestAllTimeMoviePodcast@gmail.com, or find us on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, Letterboxd, TikTok, or Blue Sky at the handle at GMOAT Podcast. The Greatest Movie of All Time is a production of Ronnie Duncan Studios. Our show is mixed, edited, and written by Thomas Duncan. Our music is thanks to Purple Planet Music. Our distributor is Captivate FM. Our technical provider is Riverside FM.